In the previous video, we have seen how we can import different file formats into our After Effects project. Now, let's go ahead and start working on our first motion design video using the files that we have imported. And in the process, we will learn about how we can work with the layers and the timeline. So let's start by adding the files that we have imported into the timeline. So I start by adding the video file to the timeline, and then I add the PNG image that I have imported into my project into the timeline. So as you can see, now I have two layers on the timeline, and here in the composition window, I can see the result of these layers. Similar to Photoshop, the order of the layers in After Effects are also very important. That means that After Effects displays the layers on top of each other on the composition window. So as you can see, right now we don't see the image that we have added to the timeline because the video layer is actually on top of the image layer. But if I click, hold, and drag the image layer on top of the video layer, as you can see, the image now appears on the composition window. So always remember that the order of the layers defines what you see on the composition window. If you remember, we have previously mentioned that what we see on the composition window is actually the state of the layers on the playhead. So if I click and drag the playhead, as you can see, the image on the composition window actually changes. So remember that we also see the state of the layers at the playhead. In other words, we are looking at the layers at this very particular moment in time, which is represented by the playhead. So if I take the playhead and drag it forward, at some point, as you can see, the video disappears. And if you look at our layers, you will see that our video layer actually stops existing at this particular time on the timeline. So this bar that we see on the timeline, which actually represents the duration of the video layer, shows us when the video layer starts and when it ends. Now, if you look at the image layer, you will see that the bar of the image layer on the timeline goes all the way to the end of the work area. And that means that when I move the playhead on the timeline, I should actually see the image all the way to the end of the work area. You can actually change the timing of different layers on the timeline. Let's say, for example, I would like to have the video starting a bit later on in the work area. So I can simply click, hold, and drag this layer a bit further and have it, for example, start at 20 seconds on the timeline. So in this case, in the beginning of the video, as you can see, we don't see the video, but at 20 seconds, the video layer starts to appear on the composition window, and then it ends at this particular time. So it is possible to move these layers around and change the timing of different layers. We can also change the duration of the layers on the timeline. So let's say, for example, our image layer right now runs for the whole duration of the work area. And if we want, we can change that. So let me go ahead and make it a bit shorter in duration. So what I do to do that is to bring the mouse cursor to the end of the bar of this layer. And as you can see, as soon as I do that, the mouse cursor's icon changes. And then I click, hold, and then drag it to the left. And as you can see, now I have reduced the duration of the image layer. So if you pay attention at this particular time on the playhead, we don't see the image on the composition window anymore. But if I bring the playhead back, as you can see, now we only see the image layer for the duration of the bar on the timeline. I can do the same thing on the beginning of this layer on the timeline, so I can just bring the mouse cursor over the beginning of this layer and click and drag and then make it shorter from the beginning. So this way you can decrease or increase the duration of each one of these layers. Sometimes you may want to make very accurate adjustments on the timeline, and therefore you will need to zoom in on the timeline. You can do that by using this lever down here. So if I click on this and drag, as you can see, I can zoom in or I can zoom out on the timeline. So whenever you want to make very accurate adjustments, you can actually zoom in and make the adjustments as you want, and then you can zoom out to see the whole working area. When you look at the timeline, you also see all these different buttons and options up here and down here. For now, you should not worry about them because you will learn about them later. But maybe it is time to learn about the buttons or options here, which are the options related to each one of the layers. So let's see what these options are doing. So let's start by the first option here, which has an icon of an eye. So this option actually is used for hiding or unhiding different layers. So let's say, for example, if I click on the eye icon for this layer, as you can see, I actually make that layer invisible. To unhide it, I can click here again and make it visible again. Now, beside this, we have this speaker icon, which can mute or unmute layers that have sound elements. So right now we have this video layer, and the video layer has sound or music, and therefore we can see this speaker icon over here. Now if you want, you can just click here and mute this video layer. To unmute it, you can just click here again and unmute this video layer. Beside this, we have this icon in the shape of a circle, which is called solo. Imagine that you have a lot of different layers on the timeline. Then by clicking on this solo icon, you actually keep only that specific layer visible. So right now I have clicked here on the image layer, and this is the only layer that I see. And of course, I can deactivate this by just clicking here again. Beside this, we have this lock icon, which is kind of self-explanatory. So if I want to lock any one of these layers so that I don't change them on the composition window, I can just click here. So if I click on both of these, now when I go to the composition window, I cannot select or move these layers any longer. To unlock them, I just need to click here and unlock the layers. And now that I go to the composition window, as you can see, I can move things around. In the next video, we will look at how we can change the properties of each one of the layers.